that thing you're looking for of feeling like you're hot shit and you've got nothing more to learn, it's never going to happen. Talk to the best of the best, and they're not there.
The Oscar goes to
Chris Williams.
Chris Williams.
If you work in animation, you have to get accustomed to the idea that you're going to spend most of your career working on something that isn't very good. You're in the process of finding the thing that is good. The storyboarding phase is one where you can kind of find those things. This is sort of maybe a hot topic right now. When I first got to Disney, and it was all very sudden, just a little over a week, a notice that they gave me, do you want a position? And leaving my family, all my friends, everything I knew, and packing a bag and moving to California. But I do remember coming into work that very first day. Glenn Keane actually held the door open for me on the first day. Certainly humbling, but also really, really inspiring and really motivating. And I realized boy, I've got a lot of work to do to approach this level. You can have all these things that seem exciting, but you don't have a story. It's a slow building process. Showing unfinished work, I think that's the most critical. That's when you have to be fearless and you have to put your ego aside. You have to be able to freely disagree without it ever being personal, which is the thing that I most love about.
Before we jump into this episode, I've had some comments and messages from all of you about the tips and tricks that we've talked about in previous discussions that have really helped and connected with you guys. So I thought, how can I help you more on your artistic journeys and make everything more accessible? So we've compiled the top actionable advice from my previous discussion with Tom Moore on drawing, and we've put it in a PDF that is available right now for free in the description. If you're interested in more tips and tricks from industry giants like the Bancroft brothers, Peter DeSev, James Baxter, just to name a few. And using that exact same link, you can join the waitlist for our upcoming monthly newsletter, where we'll be sharing all of these actionable tips and tricks, plus so much more with all of you. I'm really excited to get this started, and I hope this helps you on your journey, just as much as I hope this next conversation will as well. To get through, when you start thinking about a story from a single image, what are the story beats that you are then pulling out of it? And how do you think you then start to structure that in terms of visual language? Like, do you start with the storyboards always? Do you always draw first? Or do you have that one image and then you're like, okay, I'll go off and write a script? Or is it a bit of both?
Well, I think it starts by embracing the idea that it's a long process. It's meant to be a long process, and the idea that you would have an image or a character a relationship, a character dynamic or thematic ideas. You can have all these things that seem exciting, but you don't have a story. And if you think you can just sit down and then write the story, then you're not going to have success. It's a slow building process. So if you might have a character or a theme you're excited about, or even a setting you're excited about, just some starting point, or some event in your life that gets you thinking, and then I embrace the idea that it's going to be one step at a time, and it's ultimately going to be a years long process, and ultimately will involve lots of other people besides myself. But it's really about starting with the scaffolding, building the thing that ultimately is going to help you find the story. So my one image that I did for Glago's Guest, I think I turned it into like a 3-sentence or 5-sentence description of what the story might be. And I think I did like 5 or 6 images or something. But even then it was so there's a period where this soldier is just out in sort of the tundra all by himself, and we have to establish that he's alone and has no interaction, no contact with any other living thing, and that's the first big beat. And then there's going to be a point of contact, and then there's going to be interaction, and there's going to be resolution. It's almost like breaking it up into those very simple pieces, and then from there, if you're saying, well, we're starting off by establishing isolation, how do you best do that? And that then becomes you might do then 10 images that are about that, and then you start to actually try to piece together a narrative structure, images that would work well together, and that ends up being sort of a months long process of trying different versions, different pathways through just that. And then you start to invite other people into the process, people who are just there to give their feedback. You show it to people. I think that's critical. I think that's the thing that that sometimes people are a little reluctant to do or shy about, is actually showing unfinished work. I think that's maybe the most critical part of the process, is showing work that that you don't feel 100% confident in yet, that you don't think it's finished, but there's something there. There's some promise there. There's some potential. That's when you have to be fearless, and you have to put your ego aside, and you have to invite other people in and get their point of view, and not just one or two people. Try to invite as many people in as possible, and get their thoughts. And it doesn't mean that you lose authorship. It's, if you get a bunch of people's points of view, you still have to maintain your own point of view. But if someone says something that you respond to or unlocks something for you, it's still your thing. You're still the author of that thing. And the movie, the short, the story, whatever you're creating, it will get better through this interaction. And then you start to interact with people whose job it is to interact with you, the editor, the other story artists, the writers, the whoever, and the enterprise itself starts to grow, but it has to grow organically, and the thing itself has to grow organically and naturally and slowly, and you have to take advantage of every opportunity along the way to make it better. And if you bypass or skip those opportunities, either because you're in a rush, or you don't want to be you don't want to be confronted by any point of view other than it's amazing. If you anything other than sometimes people just don't want to hear what other people have to say. And it's easier just to race through the finish, and be very protective and sheltered about it. But that I don't think is the best way. The key is to be open and egoless in how you make things, but at the same time, always make sure that you're maintaining your own point of view, your own perspective, and you have to be able to articulate with the thing you're working on, to the extent that you know what it is. You have to be able to articulate that and explain why, defend what you're doing, and then at the same time be able to be receptive to new ideas along the way. And that's the balance you have to strike. But once you say, okay, this is going to be a long, slow process to hopefully make it better and better, and ultimately arrive at the great thing that and it's funny because you don't actually know what it is yet. You can invest months and years on a thing, especially if we're talking about a feature film. No one knows exactly what it is yet. It's constant evolution and change, and sometimes there can be massive spasms of change where the thing radically changes. The thematic ideas, because the thing will start to talk to you, right, and say, no, that thing you thought was great, that's not what this movie's supposed to be. It's supposed to be this, and you develop a relationship with it, and the thing can change dramatically. So all along the way, wherever you're at in the process, you're not. I think that you're not making the thing. You're making the thing that's going to help you find the thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like we said, ephemeral, hard to talk
ephemeral
about.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, because you're making a thing, but you don't know exactly what it is yet. And then you start to invest years, and you invite dozens and then hundreds of people to join you in that process, and they're choosing to take a chance and invest their talent and their time into something, and all along the way, no one knows exactly what it is. And the movies that I've worked on, and the movies that I've been around, they take a while to find themselves, which that translates to they're usually not very good for a long time, right? And of course that can make people feel very antsy and uncomfortable, whether you're someone who's investing your energy into something, or if you're a studio investing money into something. It's not comfortable to be ways into the process and not have something that is great yet. And so what I've had to say to people from time to time is that if you work in animation, you have to get accustomed to the idea that you're going to spend a fair amount of your career, maybe most of your career, working on something that isn't very good, because it's in the process. You're in the process of finding the thing that is good, and now I'm 30 years in. I've been in animation for 30 years, and I've become more at peace with that idea. But it's never entirely comfortable to work under those circumstances. I don't know if that was a long answer. I'm not even sure if I answered the question. But you tell me.
Yeah, you did. It's like, what do I get out of that? Okay, so the first thing we know about this is it's a super iterative process, very iterative. In order to tell stories, it has to be a collaborative process. You know what I mean? Because ultimately, if you try, what is the purpose of the story? It's to connect, it's to share some information, in a kind of an entertaining way. And if you keep that to yourself, then it's not a story. Do you know what I mean? So ultimately, the very nature of a story means you need to collaborate. So in my head, there's no sense in holding, from what you said, there's no sense in holding back your idea because at some stage you're going to say it. And if you're too precious about it, it's too fragile, it's not going to hold up to what you want, So that idea of letting go of the ego and saying, hey, here's my little flickering flame, what do you guys think about it? And they might blow their air, their wind or whatever. And you have to hold on to that little fella and maybe try gas it. But ultimately, if it goes through the right filters and the right people, they'll also start adding gas to it and make it bigger and brighter. That was also a very ephemeral.
No, but everything you said was right on the money to me. The idea of iteration, willingness to redo things over and over and over again on a smaller scale, whether it's just as I have worked for a long time as a storyboard artist, and whatever I'm directing on, I'm also storyboarding. So even just that panel that you're working on, if it's not expressing something correctly, you just throw it out and do another one and iterate over and over and over again. Then you iterate on a scene, and then you iterate on an act, and then you iterate on the entire film, and that's just an inherent part of the process. And all along the way, collaboration, as you said, is critical. Getting lots of points of view, and all. I think most art forms are, collaborative to some extent, some more than others, but animation tends to be deeply collaborative, I think, at its best. But it's made somewhat more complicated by the fact that there's another element, which is just your own intuition. You have to be able to, sometimes we talk about the math of story structure. There are sort of, you can talk about the rules that govern these things and try to defend things in that more structural way. But there are times where there's something in you that says that something is right. And that can be sometimes harder to articulate, and you should try. But there is that other element. And one of my favorite directors is Mike Nichols. And I've seen interviews where he talks about that, being in tune with his intuition. And I don't think you can make a movie like The Graduate without sort of there being this other voice. It'd be hard to put up an outline to The Graduate and have people buy in, having not seen it, but there's something else that is a component in all this. And so that's where the collaborative nature of it, the egoless environment you need to foster, coupled with the importance of that instinct and intuition. That's a real tightrope, or you have to find a balance between those things in order to do it effectively.
Something I love that you said before, I've heard you say it, is that you have to go down the wrong roads to find the right story, right?
Sure.
I think we've talked about that in terms of iteration, but it's also like the egoless sense of, okay, I'm just going to explore this. I'm just going to see where this leads. It's not that I'm trying to solve a problem or anything like that. I'm just exploring the story. The process is the key. The process is the key, not the end goal. Because again, like we said at the start, getting there, when you get there, whatever, it's there, cool, great, everything feels good. But getting there and learning is really, I think, how your intuition develops, And I think a question for you then. Even in this not so long, like you're an ancient man, but a long time, right?
Yes.
I'm sure at the start you didn't have this thought process. So, to single this down to a question,
Mm.
if you were to talk to yourself in your early 20s now, what are 2 or 3 things that you would say that you've learned that you're just like, okay, this would really have sped up my process?
Yeah. First, I'll talk just about your idea that of exploring and how critical that is, and the willingness to try things when you're not sure if it's the right thing. And the interesting thing is sometimes there can be in a nice way, not a ton of investment. You can say, oh, here's a thought that I have, and someone in the story room can say, oh, I think I have a better idea, or oh, what if you coupled that with this, and you can sort of quickly arrive at a better idea. But sometimes it involves much more investment. You will explore it as a story artist yourself, or ask a story artist to, or a writer to spend days or weeks, and a story artist to spend days or weeks, and then an editor to spend days and weeks working on this thing, and then you try to assemble an act or a screening of the movie, and only then do you see that it wasn't right, And so you have to, not only do you have to be willing to explore, but you have to then execute. And you have to execute and really pour everything that you have as an artist into this thing, with the knowledge that there's a very good chance it's not going to be in the movie. It's not going to be right. It's just going to be one of those things that's going to help us find the right thing. And so there has to be a certain toughness if you work in animation, a willingness to work really, really hard and make sometimes great sacrifices of your time, and in order to arrive at the conclusion that it's not right after all, and then be okay with that, accept that that is just part of the process, and then move on, and so animation can sort of weed people out a little bit. Like, if that's not your cup of tea, then animation is not for you. You have to be there has to be, and certainly editors are the ultimate epitome of that. You know what I mean? They have to work hard. Their deadlines get really hard, and they have to they'll work into the night, and they will hit their deadlines, and they'll put together scenes, and then a director will look at them, or an audience will look at them, and then we'll throw it all away, and we'll redo it, and so that's baked into the process. I think your question about things that I've learned along the way, I think that as I was saying, with time, I've become more and more at peace with the idea that things are going to evolve and change, and that there's going to be other points of view introduced that are going to make the movie get better and better. And I think if I went back to I think I was 23 when I started at Disney, if I would go back and talk to that guy, I'd probably tell him that you're not always right. I think there is, and there's something nice in a way about the confidence of youth. You're at that age, you start to feel like, yeah, I got it all figured out, and watch me shoot my mouth off.
Yeah, exactly. Opinion without experience.
Yeah, and there's something. It's sort of there's a power in that. You know what I mean? That fearlessness. And I think it's nice as a component as far as the structure of a team. But the idea that, like, understanding now, like, I'm gonna, like, being able to not only maintain your own strong point of view, but be able to be receptive to other people's points of view, and understand that you yourself, as no matter how sure you are that something is right, the good chance that ultimately you're going to come to terms with the fact that it was wrong, and you know what, the thing is, that's okay. Like, that's not a crime. Having strong opinions, being able to express your opinions, that's what we're here to do. That's our job. Ultimately, then realizing that you were wrong about something, that's also the ability to do that is also part of your job, And if you can get into a room in an editorial bay or a story room with people who all share that sensibility, that willingness to mix it up and disagree and iterate on ideas, but all in a really sort of a healthy way, understanding that all ideas are subjective and all points of view are subjective. And we're all just trying to work towards finding the better thing collectively. And that we can disagree with each other, and it's never personal. The rules that govern the interactions in a story room or an editorial bay, or really any space where, whether I'm talking to viz dev artists or whatever it is, or the animators, the rules that govern those interactions are not the same rules that govern our everyday interactions. Like if I see someone who's just gotten a haircut, I say, nice haircut. Like I don't start giving them notes on how their haircut might have been different. Like, maybe, did you think about doing this, or what if you'd done that? You know what I mean? Like, that's just not what we do. We try to just sort of support each other and come to a agreement generally in our day-to-day interactions. But that's not the way animation works. We have to be able to freely disagree without it ever being personal. And that's, and when that starts to happen, and when you can feel it in the story room, you can feel all the ideas kind of tumbling onto that table in front of us, and then you can sort of pick through them, and so that to me is one of the most important things a director can do, is I think facilitate that environment where people feel comfortable volunteering their points of view, and they will never feel bad about expressing a contrary point of view. If someone feels stupid because they expressed an idea that the director or whoever didn't respond to, then they're going to sit on their next idea. They're not going to express their next idea, and that next idea might have been gold, And so it has to be a thing where you appreciate, even if you disagree with a point of view, you appreciate their willingness to volunteer it, and that's when you start, getting somewhere. So I think I've only said one thing that I would say to young Chris Williams. It's hard because when I first got to Disney, I was relatively inexperienced as far as animation goes. I had studied fine arts in my hometown, and then I studied animation for 2 summers at Sheridan College up in Canada. And so I had, I'd studied the basics, but I would hardly say that I was a great animator or had a ton of experience in animation, And so I got I was hired, and I did an internship in Florida. Then I did a story training program here in
Florida and Mulan, was it?
I did just an internship, just a basic sort of training for animation. Then I came to California for a story training program, and then they put me on to Mulan. But I remember, then back to Florida, and I remember my first day, and it was all very sudden. When I'd been given that offer to come to California, I was living in Canada at the time, and I think it was just a little over a week notice that they gave me. Do you want a position? And so I had to make a quick decision. Yeah. I mean, but it meant giving up, leaving my family, all my friends, everything I knew, and packing a bag and moving to California. That was all. It all felt very sudden. But I do remember coming into work that very first day, and Glenn Keane actually held the door open for me on the first day. It was one of those things where he was ahead of me on the sidewalk going to the door. And it was one of those things where it was like the distance between us was really too long for him to hold the door open for me, but he's such a nice guy that he did. And so I kind of picked up my pace and walked in. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, Glenn Keane just held the door open for me. He has no idea who I am, I'm a kid. But I remember walking into that building at the time, of course, everyone drew on paper and would pin their art up on the walls. And so I walked in and I was just floored, because there was this, in that one building, there was such a dense concentration of some of the best artists on the planet. And here was all their work, and it was certainly humbling, but also really, really inspiring and really motivating. And I realized, boy, I've got a lot of work to do to get up to this level, or to approach this level, and I ended up then working closely with Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois, and Dean and I started around the same time, and we shared a cubicle wall, and Dean had been working in the industry for a long time and was already such a mature artist. He was so great, and I got to see Chris Sanders' work as well, and they both had very different approaches to their drawing style and the way that they would approach story, but both were obviously really good at what they did. And I got to kind of sort of learn from both of them, and then all of the artists around me. And so I just rolled up my sleeves and I worked really, really hard. And I was willing to work weekends and work late into the night. And I just really was excited about getting better and recognized that I wasn't at that level. You know, I'd always been into, I didn't fool myself, into thinking that I was so hot, and I'd always loved visual storytelling. I used to make stop motion films and write comic strips and stories, and I knew I had this I don't know, I knew that there was potential, but I could see that some of the raw ability, just wasn't there, and so I just needed to develop as an artist, and that's what I did. And so I worked really, really hard. So on one hand, I might say I'm still answering your question from like 20 minutes ago. on one hand, I'm so sorry. On one hand, I might say to that young Chris Williams, like, hey, cool the engines. It's okay. You have time. But you know what? It's hard. It's hard to say that isn't a big part of what ultimately makes people successful, is a willingness to work hard and a willingness to say, like, I'm not there as an artist and I could be better. And one of the really sort of tricky things that I've talked about with really, really talented artists that I am really in awe of is so many of the great artists, they see the flaws in their own work. They're not satisfied. That's a better way of saying it. They're not satisfied with their own work. And so I've been with Glenn Keane, or I don't know if you know John Ripa, an incredible story artist. Most of the great story artists that I worked at Disney and now at Netflix, the ones that are really, really great are the ones that are the most self-critical. They're the ones that are not satisfied and want to get better. And so they're still pushing themselves. And then the thing is, that's how they got where they're at. That's why they're so great, is because they were never satisfied and they never plateaued, and they always wanted to push and learn to get better and be inspired by the people around them. And so there's some amount of, unfortunately, it's a double-edged sword. There's some amount of dissatisfaction with your own work that drives you to get better. And then the question is, can you as an artist ever be truly satisfied? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm not there. I don't think I've ever worked on a scene or a drawing or a movie and said, "Mwah, I nailed it. It's perfect." I'm always sort of looking at the things that I thought worked well and the things that didn't, and it's the things that I thought I could have done a better job with that actually pushed me to hopefully get better and on to the next project. So yeah, I guess I would say to that young Chris Williams, I'm still answering that question. It's a good thing to recognize, to be inspired by others and to work hard and work hard to get better. But understand that thing you're looking for of feeling like you're hot shit and you've got nothing more to learn, it's never going to happen, And so maybe on some level, just kind of pace yourself and accept it and understand this is the journey. This is the journey that we're all on. And the artists that you look up to, the artists that we all look up to, they're on that journey too. Because I talk to the best of the best, and they're not there.
You are not your ideas. So that's a really good way to separate. Stop the ego nagging at you. It's like they rejected you. no, they haven't rejected you. You're still in the room. You're here with them. They want to talk with you. You are not your idea. Just throw it out. Just vomit it out. And killing the ego is so essential. But again, like we talk about this double-edged sword, and I think you've stumbled into something that is so pertinent. Like there's these people talk about these 3 traits of highly successful people. One is thinking you're good at what you do. You're hot shit, right? You deserve this. The second thing is also knowing that what you do is never good enough, So it's like this crazy double-edged sword of, I know I can do this. I not that I deserve this, but I really, really feel like this is what I should be doing. And also part of that is I'm not satisfied with where I am. I need to keep working hard to get there. The third trait is that hard work, And that's so cool that you just found that as well.
Yeah, that's really, it's true that you do need some amount of confidence just to take that first step, right? I need to have some amount of confidence that I can direct a movie, to be willing to ask hundreds of other people to join me in that journey, because I become beholden to the crew. I owe them a great movie that collectively we can make a great movie, and that all of your hard work is going to be worth it. So you need a certain amount of confidence just to say, yes, I can direct a movie, and which is a pretty bold thing to sort of to say, and it has to be coupled with this humility, to know that I'm not going to do it alone. I am going to be relying on lots of other talented people. And if I'm working with an editor or an animator or a viz dev artist or whatever it is, a production designer, you name it, an effects artist, like across the board, they're better at their job than I am, right? And so I can collaborate with them, and I can help them understand what the moment is, or a scene or the movie, and be able to articulate those things and sort of help build on what they're creating. But I can't say, step aside, let me do it. You know what I mean? Like, we're completely reliant on each other, which is the thing that I most love about animation, is that we are so interdependent, and no one person can actually tell you how an animated movie gets made. It's too complicated, And so I do like that part of it. So yeah, the confidence is key, but being able to say, like, I don't have all the answers, and I want to hear what you have to say, and it's okay. It has to be coupled with that. And there was a great example of that. And that's as important, letting other people know that like we can kick things around. You can disagree with me. It's totally cool. And sometimes what that means is like that I will be able to better articulate actually what I'm thinking. And sometimes it'll be this thing where someone will have an idea, I'll have a different idea, and then a third person will say, "Oh, I see what you guys are talking about. What if you did this?" So it's that third idea that never would have seen the light of day had there not been this willingness to kind of to mix it up. But oh well, shoot, I had a thing. Oh yeah, I was gonna bring up an example. Where that kind of environment can bear fruit, So on the Sea Beast, we had a scene. There's a scene in the first part of the second act where they have their first confrontation with the red bluster, the ultimate monster, and the monster and the ship get tangled in the lines, and there's a danger that both the creature and the ship are going to be destroyed, and all of the crew members are going to be killed, and Jacob is
yeah.
Thanks. It's an incredible. We had an incredible crew, and there's a moment where Jacob, he's calling to Crow and saying we have to cut the lines, and initially the way I'd conceived the scene is it was Jacob that defied Crow and ultimately cut the lines that separated the monster and the ship, and one of our story artists, Mia, she thought it should be Maisie, the young stowaway, that would cut the lines, and so she presented that idea, and I talked about how I thought it was more interesting if it was Jacob, because he's just his defiance of his father figure. It felt very meaningful and something he was gonna have to live with for the rest of the story, and it was gonna charge his ultimate reunion with with Captain Crow, and so I had all these reasons why I thought it should be Jacob. And so then we kind of moved on and talked about other things. And then like a week later, Mia came back to it. And she's like, yeah, there's just something. And I feel it should be Maisie. And she would express why she thought it should be Maisie. And then it finally clicked for me that it wasn't important that Jacob cut the lines, but it's important that he's on the hook for it, that he be culpable for it. And so we arrived at the idea that Maisie could cut the lines, which is great because it really sort of ties Maisie and Jacob together. That Jacob was there and he could have stopped it, but he didn't. So now he's on the hook, and now that really bonds and connects Jacob and Maisie. They're both guilty of this crime from Crow's point of view, and it then gave them something to talk about. Who was to blame for their predicaments as the story evolved, and it really bonded them. It felt like the right thing, once it all sort of unfolded and once we placed in there, it was perfect. It gave Maisie a real choice moment early in the movie, showed to her strength and her confidence, but it also was a crossroads for Jacob, where he wasn't able to 100% defy his very powerful father figure, but at the same time, in his heart, he knew Maisie was doing the right thing and he couldn't stop her. And it became a much more interesting moment. And it was because Mia felt comfortable as a young story artist. She felt comfortable returning to an idea that I had initially sort of didn't go with, and that's where it and it's almost like at that point, a lot of what I am doing as a director is being a conduit for other people's good ideas, and nothing makes me happier, than to be able to channel these great ideas and get them into the movie, because then they feel invested and they want to work harder. But the movie gets better. It's not like a charity I'm giving. It's not charity I'm doing for them. Like, they made the movie better, and that's what they're here to do. And they're professionals, and they care. And so I love when that kind of thing happens. So anyway, I'm not sure if I've answered you.
You have. No, it's good. But that's the thing about these kind of, spectral ideas. It's very hard to grasp them. So you need to, like, our language falls short all the time. So we need examples to kind of pull this through. One thing did pop in my mind there, this idea of, speaking of going down the wrong roads, throwing it out there, right? Storyboards, we've been using them since nearly the inception of animation, right? Why do you think that is? And is there a better way to do it?
Well, I sure haven't thought of one. I love storyboarding. I love the process. I worked for first half of my career, I was a storyboard artist, and I continued to draw. And so if I'm working on Moana or Big Hero 6 or Sea Beast, I would end up directing by day and oftentimes storyboarding by night, because I just loved it, and it's a way that I can contribute, and I continue, and I want to continue to get better at it. It's one of the things that I want to improve on. And so yeah, I mean, it's such a great, it's something you can do relatively quickly. That's a pretty decent approximation of what the movie's going to be, and so it just makes sense. Like if you can talk about a movie all day, but that's not experiencing the movie, and so through the whole process of putting together scenes and story reels and screenings, it's you just trying to approximate to an audience what you think the thing's ultimately going to be. And I haven't seen a better tool than storyboarding to accomplish that. And so yeah, I love it, and I know that I suppose there's sometimes a debate about, can there be this a previous stage that sort of bites into that time that has historically been allocated to storyboarding, and I think there's value in previs. I think there's value in each step along the way, but I would never want to, and I know this is sort of maybe a hot topic right now, I never want to shortchange what historically for me has been that period of time where the movie is on story reels, and because it's efficient, and we have incredibly talented story artists that I've worked with, and that's their opportunity, their time to make the movie better. You know, if you're a storyboard artist, you're kind of the first director on the scene. You're thinking about cutting and staging and acting and dialogue and almost everything that a movie is, you know, is something you have control over as a storyboard artist. And the act of, you can sort of sit for, you know, a few minutes and kind of picture a scene in your head. But it's the actual execution. If that takes a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever that is, it's through that execution, living with it, that some of the best stuff comes from that. You know, just sitting with a moment and then thinking, oh, like, but what if the character did this? And suddenly there's a new fork in the road, and that leads me to a better conclusion, or a more interesting or entertaining or emotional avenue, you know? And so I value really every step of the way. And I think that previs and layout are obviously stages where the movie can continue to improve. But I would never compromise the storyboarding component of it.
That's it. That's it. That's it. Yeah, I love that. No, that's great.
I was just talking to Owen Sullivan, who is if you ever want to talk to someone about storyboarding, Owen is amazing. He was the story on the Sea Beast. And when you're working on a scene, there's opportunities for a revelation, a moment of inspiration that makes you realize, like, oh, this is the wrong scene, you know, or the scene needs to change dramatically, or it's missing an idea or a character or whatever, or thematically it's not right for the movie, or whatever. You know, there's chances, there's opportunities for a total rethink or redo, which is great. That's what we do. Sometimes it's just these infusions of little moments of character that are so essential to the entertainment and connecting with the characters in the movie. And a very tiny example, this does not do right by Owen as far as what his massive contribution to the movie, because he did a lot of the emotional scenes, he did a lot of the big action scenes, the huge set pieces. He can kind of do it all. But there's a moment where Jacob is on the ship in the first scene, which he boarded, and it's incredible. Like, just as far as like managing the space and the character and all that, he did an incredible job. And you know, Damon and our previous team also made a massive contribution to that scene. But there's a moment where this tentacle is sweeping across the deck towards Jacob, and he does this little action where he puts his hand up, you know, which is of no consequence. That's not going to stop the tentacle. But it's this joyful little addition that he made that made you love Jacob in that moment, you know? And that tiny little addition will inform who that character is for the rest of the movie, you know? And when you say, why do I like a character? It's a combination of so many things and all the little choices and all the mannerisms and all the interactions. But the storyboarding phase is one where you can kind of find those things. And you can find really interesting interactions and little choices and beats of character that really make the movie so much richer. Which is not to take away from the fact that sometimes a story artist, a director, a writer, anyone is in a position to come up with the idea that radically transforms the entire movie. You know, there's that too. But both things are really important, and both things can be a product of the storyboarding stage.
Thank you so much. That was great. That was so good. That was so good.
No problem. It's fun. And where are you right now? Are you in the States?
In Ireland. I'm in Dublin.
Ireland, okay. All right. Yeah. And you live there?
In Dublin. That's where I live. Yeah. That's where I work from.
Oh, nice. I think I told you when I saw you, I've been to Dublin once before, and